The Prime Minister stating that the Bahamas is facing a stark reality that the vast majority of us have never seen in our lifetime. Good evening, Bahamas. I'm Jiminita Swain. Welcome to the Bahamas Tonight, the weekend edition. Thanks so much for tuning in, and of course, happy Mother's Day. Clarification on the repatriation of Bahamians and the requirements for Bahamians to return home, as well as which businesses qualify to reopen under the emergency orders, were just some of the items Prime Minister the Most Honorable Dr. Hubert Minnis disclosed during a national address earlier this evening. Altaviz Munnings joins us live in studio with the details. Good evening, Altaviz.
Good evening, Jiminita, and good evening, Bahamas. On this Mother's Day, Prime Minister the Most Honorable Dr. Hubert Minnis started his national address wishing all mothers the best on their day. He then welcomed home the 183 Bahamians who returned to New Providence and Grand Bahama this past Friday during a joint government agency exercise. He confirmed that 124 of them are in home quarantine, while 59 are in a government quarantine facility. The Prime Minister also noted that it was discovered that after the aircraft landed, that a passenger on the flight to Grand Bahama tested positive for COVID-19.
We are investigating to see how the individual was allowed to board that flight. 3 individuals traveled with this passenger. All 4 of these individuals have been tested again upon arrival, and we are awaiting the test results. All passengers wore PPEs during the flight, which decreases the risk of exposure. All passengers on the flight will remain in quarantine and will continue to be monitored.
Prime Minister Minnis reminded those in quarantine or in home isolation that if they violate the emergency order, they will either face a $20,000 fine, 5 years in prison, or both. He also noted that those Bahamians who are still abroad and could not come home were assisted with accommodations and food by diplomatic offices. The Prime Minister gave an update on other individuals who entered the Bahamas before Friday's repatriation exercise.
I wish to advise that over the emergency period, a total of 6 other persons comprised of 6 Bahamian citizens, 1 permanent resident, and 3 work permit holders, being skilled technicians contracted to conduct specialized emergency work for utility services, were permitted to enter the Bahamas. I am also advised that all these individuals were screened by health officials and were placed under self-quarantine. One of those Bahamians was permitted to exit the country and to re-enter the Bahamas after medical care over the course of a 24-hour period. This individual was administered a COVID-19 test upon re-entry and was placed under self-quarantine. The second Bahamian obtained the COVID-19 test prior to entry and was also placed under self-quarantine. 1 permanent resident was permitted entry who obtained a COVID-19 test prior to arrival and was placed under self-quarantine. A total of 3 work permit holders were permitted entry for emergency and essential purposes.
The Prime Minister confirmed that 2 of those work permit holders worked with Bahamas Power and Light Company, while the other was hired as an engineer on a private island. The Prime Minister listed the requirements for Bahamians wanting to return home once approval has been granted by the Civil Aviation Authority. He stated that those Bahamians must first register at a Bahamas embassy or consulate and then obtain a COVID-19 molecular swab test with a negative result before permission is granted. The Prime Minister then explained the Emergency Powers COVID-19 No. 3 order that allows certain businesses to reopen for home delivery and curbside pickup on May 4th, as well as allowing commercial activity to resume in the southern Bahamas.
It is important for business owners to carefully read these provisions and to strictly comply with the physical distancing and sanitizing requirements that are necessary, and the requirements for the remote or electronic placement of all purchase orders, both for curbside and home delivery services. These provisions are designed to relate strictly to retail business establishments, which can operate efficiently without the need for direct person-to-person physical contact or face-to-face interactions. They were never intended to apply to the operations of gaming houses, and this is now abundantly clear by the provisions of Part B of the order. Those provisions specifically state that permission to engage in home delivery and curbside pickup services do not apply to gaming house operators.
Now, the Prime Minister also dedicated a portion of his national address to the economic peril of COVID-19, and we will address that in tomorrow's newscast. We want to tell you, though, that the Prime Minister exclusively told our news team this weekend that he was tested for COVID-19 last week, Wednesday, and those results turned out negative. In fact, the Prime Minister said several members of his team, including security personnel and 2 pilots, were all tested, and those results also turned out negative. Now, the Prime Minister confirmed the tests took place as he was scheduled to travel to Grand Bahama yesterday to inspect the medical facilities on that island. However, Ministry of Health officials advised the Prime Minister to postpone the trip because they don't see community spread of the virus on Grand Bahama, but pockets of the virus on the island, and they didn't want the Prime Minister to be exposed. Once again, we'll have more on the Prime Minister's national address in tomorrow's newscast. Reporting live, I'm Altaviz Munnings. Back to you, Jimenita.